The flickering neon sign of the diner cast a garish pink glow on the rain-slicked street outside. Inside, the stale smell of grease and cheap coffee hung heavy in the air, a familiar scent that usually brought a strange comfort. But tonight, it felt suffocating. My mother, Eleanor, clutched her chest, her face contorting into a mask of pain that I had seen far too many times before. It wasn't a dramatic collapse. Not yet. More of a slow, agonizing crumple, like a puppet whose strings were being deliberately slackened. Her eyes, usually sharp and critical, darted wildly, searching for something, someone. Not me. I knew that much. Never me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text. I already knew who it was from, and what it would say. Sarah, my younger sister, the ever-dutiful, ever-sympathetic one. Always rushing to pick up the pieces, always trying to fix what was irrevocably broken. I pulled out the phone, the screen illuminating her frantic message. Call 911. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. The heat of the screen against my thumb was surprisingly warm as I pressed delete. Gone. Just like that. I watched Eleanor, her breathing becoming shallow, her hand still pressed against her chest as if to hold a vital organ in place. The noise of the diner, previously a dull hum, now seemed distant, muffled. Other patrons, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding at our table, chatted and laughed. A couple in the booth opposite us was sharing fries, their fingers brushing. A stark contrast to the cold chasm that had always existed between Eleanor and me. No one would notice. Not yet. Not until it was too late. And that was exactly how I wanted it. The rain outside intensified, drumming a relentless rhythm against the window. It felt like the world was weeping, but my heart remained as dry and unyielding as the cracked leather of the diner booth. This was a long time coming. The years of biting remarks, the constant comparisons to Sarah, the feeling of never quite measuring up. It all swirled in my mind, a bitter cocktail I'd been forced to drink since childhood. Tonight, I was finally pouring it out. The diner manager, a portly man with a perpetually stressed expression, finally noticed the commotion. Or rather, the lack thereof. Eleanor had slumped further, her head now resting precariously on the tabletop amidst spilled coffee. A few people nearby had started to turn, their conversations dying down to hushed whispers. Sarah, bless her predictable heart, finally burst through the diner doors, soaking wet, her hair plastered to her face. Her eyes, wide with panic, immediately found mine. "What happened? I got your text. What's going on?" She gasped, her voice raw with fear. She hadn't gotten my text, of course. She had sent me one. I simply stared at her, offering no explanation, no comfort. Let her scramble. Let her feel the helplessness I had so often endured at the hands of our mother. She rushed to Eleanor's side, her hands already checking for a pulse, murmuring reassurances to a woman who was likely beyond hearing them. The manager, now fully aware, was on the phone, his voice a frantic mumble. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing steadily louder. The artificial light of the diner seemed to pulsate with the urgency of the moment, yet I felt a strange calm. I watched Sarah as she cradled Eleanor's head, tears streaming down her face. Her devotion was unwavering, almost sickening in its purity. I remembered a time, years ago, when I had fallen and scraped my knee badly. Eleanor had simply told me to get up, that I was being dramatic. Sarah, only 5 at the time, had been the one to clean my wound and put a cartoon bandage on it. Even then, she had been the healer, the caretaker. And I had been the one who watched, who learned that tenderness was a weakness. The ambulance pulled up outside, its red and blue lights flashing an unwelcome intrusion into my carefully constructed indifference. Paramedics rushed in, their movements swift and professional. They gently, but firmly, pushed Sarah aside. I remained in my seat, a silent observer. The hospital waiting room was a sterile, unforgiving expanse of pale green walls and uncomfortable plastic chairs. The air conditioning hummed relentlessly, a monotonous drone that did little to soothe the tension. Sarah paced back and forth, wringing her hands, her usually vibrant spirit utterly diminished. Her clothes, still damp from the rain, clung to her, a visual metaphor for her distress. She occasionally glanced at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and hurt, as if trying to decipher my stoic composure. I gave her nothing. My face remained an impassive mask, carefully constructed over decades of practice. A doctor, a tall woman with tired eyes, eventually emerged. Her voice was soft, apologetic. "I'm so sorry. We did everything we could." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Sarah let out a choked sob, collapsing into one of the plastic chairs. Her shoulders shook uncontrollably. I felt a faint tremor in my own hands. A surprising, unwelcome reaction. Was it grief, or simply the lingering adrenaline of the evening? I pushed it down, deep inside, where all inconvenient emotions resided. This was a victory, not a loss. A chapter closed. I watched Sarah's raw, unfiltered pain, and for a fleeting moment, a sliver of something akin to pity pricked at my hardened exterior. But it quickly dissipated, replaced by the familiar resentment. Sarah had always been Eleanor's favorite, the golden child who could do no wrong. She had basked in Eleanor's approval, while I languished in her shadow, constantly striving for a recognition that never came. The doctor cleared her throat, interrupting my thoughts. "There are some forms to fill out, and someone will need to make arrangements." Sarah, still weeping, simply nodded, incapable of coherent speech. I knew with a chilling certainty that this task would fall to me. It always did. The burden of responsibility, the role of the pragmatic one. Even in death, Eleanor managed to manipulate us. The days following Eleanor's death were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and the hollow ritual of planning a funeral. Sarah was a ghost, wandering through the motions, her grief a heavy cloak. She barely ate, barely slept, her eyes perpetually red-rimmed. I, on the other hand, felt a perverse sense of energy. The weight of Eleanor's critical gaze, the constant feeling of inadequacy, had lifted. It was liberating, in a twisted sort of way. I handled everything with a cool efficiency that both unnerved and impressed those around me. The funeral home director praised my composure. Our few distant relatives offered their condolences and admired my strength. They didn't see the silent scream of triumph behind my polite nods. I chose a modest casket, a simple floral arrangement. No extravagant send-off for a woman who had, in my eyes, given me so little. Sarah tried to interject, suggesting a favorite hymn, a specific type of flower, but her voice was weak, easily overridden. "She wouldn't have wanted a fuss, Sarah," I'd stated, my tone firm, leaving no room for argument. It was a lie, of course. Eleanor had always loved a fuss, a performance, an audience. But this was my production now. During the viewing, a handful of people came. Eleanor hadn't been particularly social, preferring her own company and the occasional scathing gossip session. I stood by the casket, a picture of solemn grief, accepting condolences. My eyes scanned the faces, searching for any flicker of suspicion, any hint that they might see through my facade, but there was none, only sympathy. Sarah, on the other hand, sobbed openly, her body racked with tremors. She had a small framed photo of Eleanor from her younger, more vibrant days, clutched tightly in her hands. The contrast between us was stark, a silent testament to our vastly different relationships with the deceased. The finality of the closed casket filled me with a quiet satisfaction. This was it, the end of an era. My era finally was beginning. If you're finding yourself hooked by this dark tale, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more gripping stories. The reading of the will was a surprisingly anticlimactic affair. A stern-faced lawyer, Mr. Henderson, with thinning gray hair and an air of detached professionalism, read through the legal jargon in a bland, even tone. Eleanor had few assets of real value. The house, a modest sum in savings, and some antique jewelry that held more sentimental than monetary worth. The house, to my initial surprise, was left to both Sarah and me to be split equally. The savings were divided, and the jewelry was to be distributed as we saw fit. It was a fair, if uninspired, distribution. Sarah, still emotionally fragile, showed little interest in the details. She simply wanted to get it over with. "Whatever you think is best, Maria," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. Maria. My name. It felt foreign on her lips now, almost as if she couldn't quite connect it to the person she was seeing. I, however, meticulously reviewed every clause, every line. There had to be a catch, a final twist of the knife from Eleanor. But there wasn't. Just the cold, hard facts of her estate. A strange feeling settled over me as Mr. Henderson closed the file. Disappointment? No, that wasn't quite right. It was more like an emptiness. For so long I had harbored the fantasy that Eleanor would, in her final act, somehow acknowledge my existence, perhaps even apologize for the years of emotional neglect. Or, conversely, that she would leave everything to Sarah, confirming my darkest suspicions and fueling my righteous anger. But this was just mundane, ordinary. It felt like a final dismissal, even in death. Just another confirmation that I was not special enough to warrant even a final, malicious gesture. The rain outside had stopped, and the sun, a pale, watery disk, struggled to break through the clouds. A new day, they say. But for me, it felt like the same old gray. Days turned into weeks, and the initial shock of Eleanor's death gradually began to fade, replaced by the mundane reality of sorting through her belongings. The house, a relic of a bygone era, was filled with a lifetime of accumulation. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that pierced the grimy windows, illuminating forgotten treasures and junk alike. Sarah approached the task with a reverent solemnity, carefully packing away photo albums and trinkets, each item a memory. She cried often, her grief a constant companion. I, on the other hand, saw only opportunity. The house, while old, was in a desirable neighborhood. With some renovation, it could fetch a good price. The furniture, though dated, had a certain antique charm that could be marketed. My pragmatic mind immediately began calculating, strategizing. We should hire a cleaner first, I suggested, my voice devoid of emotion. Then we can start listing things online, maybe an estate sale for the bigger items. Sarah flinched at my callous efficiency. Maria, please, she pleaded, her voice cracking. Can't we just take our time? This was Mom's home. I scoffed inwardly. Mom's home. The very place that had felt more like a prison to me. Sentimentality doesn't pay the bills, Sarah, I retorted, my tone sharp. And frankly, the sooner we get this done, the sooner we can both move on. She looked at me then, truly looked at me, her eyes filled with a pain that went beyond grief, a dawning realization that the sister she thought she knew was a stranger. The silence between us stretched, thick with unspoken accusations. The old house seemed to hold its breath, absorbing the animosity that now permeated its walls. This was more than just clearing out a house. It was a battleground for two fundamentally different perceptions of family, loss, and the future. Our relationship, already strained by years of unspoken resentments, began to fray irrevocably under the pressure of clearing out the house. Every decision became a battleground. Sarah wanted to keep Eleanor's worn armchair, a relic of countless childhood story times. I argued it was too bulky, too old, and would only hinder a quick sale. She insisted on saving every letter, every card, every scrap of paper that held a faint trace of our mother. I saw only clutter, an impediment to progress. The air between us was perpetually thick with unspoken words, simmering anger, and the bitter taste of a shattered sibling bond. One afternoon, as I was sorting through Eleanor's meager collection of old records, I heard Sarah crying from the attic. I climbed the creaky stairs, the dust motes dancing in the dim light. She was huddled amidst old boxes, clutching a faded baby blanket. My baby blanket, I realized with a jolt. She kept it, Sarah sobbed, her voice muffled. She kept all our baby things, Maria. She loved us, she really did. My heart, a carefully guarded fortress, felt a sudden, unexpected tremor. Love? Eleanor? The concept was foreign, alien. She kept them because she was a hoarder, Sarah, I said, my voice harsher than intended, desperate to dispel the fragile hope that had momentarily flickered within me. Don't idealize her. You know how she was. Sarah looked up, her eyes blazing with a newfound fury. I know how you are, Maria. Cold, calculating. You didn't even shed a tear at her funeral. What is wrong with you? Her words struck me like a physical blow. The fortress wavered. The attic, once a place of forgotten memories, now felt like an arena. The air grew heavy, thick with the weight of our shared, yet vastly different past. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the mournful creak of the old house. The baby blanket, clutched in Sarah's hand, became a symbol of everything that divided us. Enjoying the unraveling of this family drama? Make sure to hit that subscribe button for more compelling content. Sarah stopped speaking to me altogether after the attic incident. Her silence was a palpable presence, heavier than any argument we could have had. She moved out of the house and into a small apartment, leaving me alone with Eleanor's ghosts and the growing stack of boxes. The process of selling the house became solely my responsibility, and I tackled it with a grim determination. I hired contractors, oversaw renovations, and dealt with real estate agents. The house transformed, shedding its musty skin for a modern, impersonal facade. Every change felt like another layer of Eleanor being erased, another step towards my own liberation. The house sold quickly, fetching a respectable price. The closing was swift, a sterile exchange of documents and money. I wired Sarah her half of the proceeds, a simple bank transfer, no personal contact. She never acknowledged it. The finality of the transaction should have brought me immense satisfaction, a sense of closure. Instead, a hollow ache began to form in my chest, the kind of emptiness that isn't filled by money or material possessions. It was a void where genuine human connection should have been. The triumph I had so eagerly anticipated felt strangely muted, tainted by an unexpected loneliness. I found myself drifting through my own apartment, a space I had meticulously curated to reflect my independence and success. But now, the sleek lines and minimalist decor felt cold, unwelcoming. The city outside, a vibrant tapestry of lights and sounds, offered no comfort. I would catch myself staring at my phone, half expecting a text from Sarah, even a scathing one, anything to break the crushing silence. But there was nothing, just the echo of my own choices, reverberating in the quiet emptiness of my life. The rain started again, a soft, relentless drizzle, mirroring the slow, quiet realization dawning within me. The silence from Sarah was absolute. No calls, no texts, no emails. It was as if I had ceased to exist in her world, and in turn, my own world began to shrink. The initial euphoria of my freedom had long since evaporated, replaced by a growing sense of isolation. My work, once a source of pride and distraction, now felt meaningless. Even my carefully cultivated social circle seemed superficial, their conversations shallow, their laughter hollow. I would often find myself staring out the window, watching families pass by, mothers holding their children's hands, sisters laughing together. A sharp pang, something akin to envy, would pierce through my carefully constructed indifference. One particularly bleak Tuesday, as the city was engulfed in a thick, oppressive fog, I was working late. The office was deserted, the only sounds the hum of my computer and the distant wail of a siren. I saw an old photograph on my desk, tucked beneath a stack of reports. It was a picture of Sarah and me as children, taken on a summer vacation. We were both grinning, our arms around each other, sandy and sun-kissed. Eleanor was behind the camera, a rare moment where her presence was felt but not seen. A wave of regret, cold and suffocating, washed over me. I remembered that day, the taste of salt water, the warmth of Sarah's hand in mine as we chased the waves. We had been inseparable then, two halves of a whole. How had we drifted so far apart? How had I allowed my bitterness, my resentment towards Eleanor, to poison the one genuine connection I had? The fog outside thickened, pressing against the window, mirroring the confusion and despair swirling within me. I reached for my phone, my fingers hovering over Sarah's contact. My thumb trembled, hesitating. What would I say? I'm sorry? Too little. Too late. I miss you? A lie, perhaps. The weight of my past choices felt immense, crushing, trapping me in a prison of my own making. The consequences of my actions slowly, inexorably began to manifest. It wasn't a dramatic downfall, no grand comeuppance. It was far more insidious. My colleagues, once admiring of my detached efficiency, now saw a coldness, a lack of empathy that made them wary. Promotions I had been working towards slipped through my fingers, given to those with better people skills. My social life, already superficial, dissolved completely as my friends tired of my increasingly withdrawn demeanor. I found myself alone, truly alone, in a sprawling, anonymous city. The apartment, once a symbol of my independence, became a gilded cage. One evening, as I sat in the silent apartment, the city lights a distant, shimmering blur, I finally allowed myself to truly feel the weight of my choices. The memory of Eleanor's final moments, the frantic text from Sarah that I had so casually deleted, played on a loop in my mind. It wasn't just Eleanor I had let down, it was Sarah, and ultimately myself. I had traded a chance at genuine connection for a hollow victory, a fleeting sense of power over a woman who, in the end, had no power over me at all. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breath. Tears, hot and stinging, finally flowed freely, a deluge that had been dammed up for decades. They weren't just for Eleanor, or for Sarah, but for the lost girl I had been, the woman I had become, and the emptiness that now defined my existence. The rain outside had stopped, and a sliver of moon peeked through the clouds, casting a faint ghostly light into the room. It illuminated the dust motes, dancing in the quiet air, a silent reminder of the passage of time, of opportunities lost. I had won the battle against Eleanor, but I had lost the war for my own soul. The consequences of my actions, once a distant concept, were now a harsh, undeniable reality. And the bitter taste of that reality was far more agonizing than any of Eleanor's past criticisms. The path to redemption, if one even existed for me, felt impossibly long, shrouded in the very darkness I had so eagerly embraced. Thank you for watching this compelling story. If you've been moved by Maria's journey and the consequences of her choices, please subscribe to the channel for more thought-provoking narratives. Your support helps us create more content like this.